I am an American veteran.
I proudly served my country.
I live the values I learned in the military.
I continue to serve my community, my country, and my fellow veterans.
I maintain my physical and mental discipline.
I continue to lead and improve.
I make a difference.
I honor and remember my fallen comrades.
We are the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Smith-Wynn Post 96, proudly serving Montgomery, Alabama, continuously since 1921.
Commissioner Kent Davis, Rear Admiral, a good friend, a great leader, good mentor for everybody in his department, and also a comrade and a lifetime member of Post 96 right here in our organization. This last month, we've seen a lot of each other. I'm going to tell you, we got our butts kicked by the legislator in this last session, and he's been a true hero in the whole effort, been very professional in some things that we probably wouldn't have been professional in, but he is a very great guy. He's leading the organization, doing everything you need to do for veterans in the state of Alabama. Can continue to do more in the future, and it's my pleasure to introduce him, Rear Admiral Kent Davis.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to stand over here so I don't block the slideshow. It's so great to see all the familiar faces. Some I've seen a lot lately. We just wrapped up our 3-day departmental conference right across the street at the Renaissance. So I've been camped out in this area for several days. Boy, I see several familiar faces. They're probably tired of seeing me. Our Assistant Commissioner in Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs, Jeff Newton, is here. Of course, Vice Chair of our State Board of Veterans Affairs, Scott Gedling. I've seen a lot. He was gracious enough to talk to our conference yesterday. My commander in Post 96, Robert Carr, who's also now a member of our department and is a full-time job. So
thanks, sir.
Hey, talking about a scam, he started this week. So Monday was a holiday. Tuesday he shows up at work, and then the next 3 days were a conference. So he sat in that conference room. So 1 day at work his first week. Not bad, Robert.
Excellent, sir. Thank you.
And for those I haven't seen in about a year, hey, I saw you last year. I have hair this year. Last year was completely bald. So if you don't recognize me, I'm Kent Davis, Commissioner of the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs. Hey, a lot going on in the world of Veterans Affairs. You can go to the next slide. I do stress this. So for the new folks in the audience, we're the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs. We are different from the federal or U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, but I stress this everywhere I go. It is a pure partnership. We work hand in hand. Everything we do at the state level is complementary to what's going on with the federal VA. In fact, the regional director of the VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, was kind enough to come and spend an hour with us at our conference the last few days. A lot going on. You know most of it. I'm not going to belabor things like the PACT Act, which you know about. But let me tell you about some things going on at the state level. Next slide. So we still provide a range of services at the state level. I talk about the continuum of service. You leave active duty, you take off your uniform on the Guard or Reserve, and you become a veteran. One of the first stops is with a service officer, whether it's with one of the great service officers in VFW, who I've used, and he's done a great job, or people are welcome to come to a state veteran service officer. And I'll talk about that and how we've expanded that role in the last few years. We still have the Dependent Scholarship Program, which complements the GI Bill, which the feds run. We have a Dependent Scholarship Program. A lot of developments in that area lately. We've done a lot in the last few years with outreach and engagement in veteran well-being and legislative affairs, which I'm going to talk about, which will be an interesting part of my discussion. Some of the things that have gone on lately legislatively. Probably our biggest story going on right now is with our state veterans homes. We're building a new state veterans home, and I've got a lot of pictures to show you. We're almost done with that project. And of course, last but certainly not least, the last service that we provide both at the federal and state level are those cemetery services, and we actually have a lot going on with that. We just finished a major expansion, so we got a lot of irons in the fire these days, and let me All good stuff. Next slide. Next slide. So our veteran service offices, we are up to 62 veteran service offices around the state in 61 counties. By the difference, we have 2 offices in Jefferson County and Birmingham. Next slide. The good news is we've expanded that greatly, and I've said this before, over the last 3 years, we've managed to add 12 new veteran service offices around the state of Alabama. That's really good news. And those are in areas that were largely inaccessible. Transportation was often an issue in those poor rural areas of the state of Alabama. And boy, those new offices have seen a lot of business since we opened them up. And those communities have been really welcoming to those veteran service offices. A couple of other developments. The PACT Act, I promised I wouldn't talk about that too much because you probably know all about it. The feds are in charge of that. But it has increased our workload by about 50%. The number of claims coming in, because that's what most of our veteran service offices do, is assist with claims filing. So our busy work has gone up quite a bit in the almost 2 years since the PACT Act was passed in August of 2022. Here's a great development. Over the past year, we have always represented veterans not only at the claims level, but at the appeals level as well. We have a whole appellate division that assists veterans free of charge with appealing decisions if they disagreed with that claims decision. This past year, we've signed an MOU with a national pro bono law firm called the National Veterans Legal Services Program. We can now actually represent free of charge veterans that have to go into the court system in pursuit of their claims. So that's a big deal. We literally can form a relationship that starts with filing a claim that goes all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, theoretically, without that veteran having to pay a penny for those services. So that's a big development over the past year with that MOU. Next slide. Our dependent scholarship program. Next slide. This is a very good program. Alabama is rather unique in that they provide scholarships to the dependents of selected disabled veterans. Some big developments in this area. For 75 years or more, the application for that scholarship was a paper-based application. It was out of date, it was onerous, we were killing a lot of trees with those applications, we were relying on the U.S. mail system. We took that within the past year online, and it's now an electronic portal, much easier to use, much more efficient, much quicker. You fill out that application within seconds. It's at our headquarters being reviewed by headquarters staff. Another big development, and this just happened in this legislative session. For years, there was a cap of $250 per semester hour that we paid under that scholarship. That's being raised to $400 per hour, effective July 31st. So less than a couple of months from now, and it'll affect the kids that are going to school in the fall. So that's a big development. That's a significant increase in the payout under that scholarship program. We were supportive of that. So both of those good things. Next slide, I think, is the portal. That's what happens now. If you're applying for the dependent scholarship program, you just go online. There's a link from our website. You fill out all the information. You upload the documents you need. Boom, within milliseconds, it's in our headquarters. It's been a dream for us, and it's taken a big paperwork workload off of our staff. So those are two good developments with the dependent scholarship program. I'm glad to see there's still public support for that scholarship program. Next slide. These are all the schools that are eligible. We had 49 with Birmingham Southern closed. So now I have to say 48 institutions that can use this scholarship program. And they're happy because these colleges literally get millions of dollars from us in these scholarship funds to support their academic program. So you look at that, that's just the public schools right there. Next slide. A couple of years ago, we added some private colleges to the mix that were approved for the scholarship program. So 48 institutions that kids go on a dependent scholarship as a tribute to someone's military service and their disability status. Next slide. Outreach and engagement. Boy, this has been our growth industry the last few years, especially veteran well-being programs, and increasingly we're getting into legislative affairs because, as we saw with the dependent scholarship program, we have to monitor that stuff, both at the federal level and the state level. And sometimes we get surprised by legislation that's out there, and we have to jump on that and give our input, stay ethical. We can't engage in lobbying, but we can certainly discuss issues and respond to queries from elected officials. Next slide. Our most pressing issue, oh, by the way, we've revamped all of our public-facing outreach efforts. So we've redone our website completely to make it more user-friendly and more informative. And we're all over social media. That's important, especially for younger veterans. We literally post something meaningful to Facebook or LinkedIn and the other social media outlets every day. And we try to make it not fluff, but useful information. So if you've never checked out our website or our social media sites, I think you'll find a lot of very useful information. We try to put announcements about veterans fairs and events coming up, changes in the law and benefits and things like that. So check it out if you've never been to our internet sites. Next slide. Here's our still most pressing issue. Boy, there's no way to sugarcoat this. And I go all over the state and nation really on a stump on this. We have serious issues in Alabama. Our statistics are not good when it comes to veteran well-being issues, and I'm sure you're aware, probably our most pressing issue is we still have a high rate of veteran suicides. That's just a tragedy. There's no way to sugarcoat that. And we spent a lot of effort trying to raise awareness of this issue. We've engaged over the last year, especially in public service campaigns. We've tried to advertise the new 988 Veterans Crisis Line as much as possible. Pretty successful in getting the word out. We'll see if that's making an effect. And our next step is we're trying to mobilize more and more assets and link up veterans that are in crisis with the assets that are out there. And frankly, we're trying to get more assets, money, pumped into programs that are already out there. We haven't had much luck with that. And I'm going to make a pitch to you in a little while how we all need your help and we all need to stick together and going after those assets. I'm not going to go through those stats, they're horrifying. It's not only veteran suicide, it's things like opioid addictions in the state. Veterans are twice as likely to take their own lives in suicide than members of the general population. They're also twice as likely to be addicted to opioids. We know a lot of the reasons for that. We now got to get after those causes and mobilize assets and work on this collectively, and it's going to take everybody working on this. Next slide. Again, look at that number. A veteran takes his or own life every 2.4 days on average in Alabama. That's a horrifying statistic. We in this room can help with that. Our department, the federal VA, nonprofits, but it's going to take everybody chipping away at this issue. It is a real problem that we just cannot ignore. Next slide. We formed a national partnership with all 50 states, the federal VA and the Department of Health and Human Services and many other partners to try to combat this. We call it Alabama's Challenge because we know it's especially bad in Alabama. We do have one of the highest rates, if not the highest rate of veteran suicides in the country. So our partnership list is growing every day. We're going to get after this. This is not a short-term effort. This is going to take many years. Next slide. We've done a lot. We go all over the state on this issue at town halls and fairs. We've had all over the state of Alabama. We've worked with universities and high schools to raise awareness through something called Operation We Remember. We work with the active duty military and Alabama National Guard on something called Operation Resilience. The idea behind that is don't be reactive. Don't wait until a veteran is in crisis and you're responding to that. Let's try to prevent that by teaching active duty military and veterans the skills to stay out of crisis. So you're not even at that point where we're recommending you pick up the phone and call someone. Self-support and resilience. We have a new website, an independent website outside the government. It's called www.vetsforhope.com. I would invite you to check that out. It is a great source of information about veterans' mental health, well-being, and especially the veteran suicide issue and some of the assets that are out there to help veterans in crisis. We hosted a big conference in the fall in Birmingham, a national conference on the tough topic of traumatic brain injury, which of course affects the veteran community much more than the general population. We're finding out through science more and more that it's not just one single bad incident, one bad concussion to the brain, but repeated concussive effects like serving in an artillery unit over many years can cause traumatic brain injury. Oftentimes the science catches up many years later. We saw that with Agent Orange, We're seeing that with traumatic brain injury now, and we're trying to address that issue as well. Lots of external partnerships and growing every day. We partner with the University of Alabama and Auburn University on Operation Iron Ruck, which is a 151-mile ruck march between the two campuses right before the Iron Bowl to raise awareness of veteran suicides. You're all welcome to come out this fall if you want to do it. I did 11 miles this past year, which is about all I was good for. But a great, just heartwarming joint experience if you've ever seen one of those. And we work with the veteran treatment courts almost on a daily basis, which is a diversionary program for veterans who find themselves in trouble with law, oftentimes connected with those other issues like opioid addictions. Next slide. There we go. All right, real quick, I'm not going to lobby. I'm supposed to be apolitical, but this is necessarily a little bit political. So a lot of things happen. Colonel Gedling and I talked about this a lot. And this is an editorial comment, admittedly. I'm not real happy with some of the things that happen in the state legislature this session. And I want to talk about three things that you perhaps can help raise awareness. And I think sometimes the misfires on legislation are a result of just not understanding the veteran community. So three things that happened recently at the legislative level. One was a grant program that we tried to start called Supporting Alabama's Veterans Grant Program. The second one is, you may be aware of this, there have been national lawsuits against opioid manufacturers and distributors. Alabama entered into a legal judicial settlement in those lawsuits and is set to receive almost $300 million in a settlement. And that money is supposed to be directed towards opioid abatement, well-being, mental health programs. There was an effort to get some of those dollars for veterans. Wasn't very successful, I'm going to be honest with you. I'll talk about that. And then last but certainly not least, there was a bill with mixed results introduced by Senator Jones and Representative Brown to try to increase state support for veterans mental health programs. Let me break this down real quick. Next slide. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to read that, obviously. But that's a timeline, how difficult it is starting something new and innovative. So almost 2 years ago, we, the State Board of Veterans Affairs and Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs, were informed that we were getting not much money, $353,000 to support veterans' mental health issues. That's not a lot of money. And then the state board voted, okay, we're going to create a grant program. We're going to distribute that money to nonprofits, veteran service organizations, and institutions of higher education that assist veterans with well-being issues. And then after that, setting up the whole program, we're told, oops, we goofed. This is no lie, no kidding. The legislature said, oh, sorry, that was a mistake. That money was supposed to go to one particular organization in one legislator's district, so we can give that money back, basically. But the good news is, it set a template. We at least have a program in place for a grant program. So the next big phase was Alabama was set to receive a lot of federal dollars under what's called the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And we were told we were going to receive $7 million in ARPA money. Not bad. To support nonprofits and institutions of higher education with veterans' well-being programs. So we set up a program, we appointed an independent panel, we put out a request for proposals. The independent 5-person panel made up of mental health experts and very distinguished veterans in Alabama reviewed those proposals, graded them, presented them to the State Board of Veterans Affairs, and they decided to make grants to 33 nonprofits and institutions of higher education to help support veteran well-being programs. What a mess. What a mess. And just a very frank observation. The lobbyists got involved in this. I gotta choose my words very carefully. A lot of special interests got involved, and eventually $7 million was redirected. Very sadly. The good news is, at the last minute, we thought, uh-oh, this is not looking good. And by the way, there was a determination. The whole program was great, no conflict of interest, any concerns that were raised were addressed, but
we ran out of time with all of the bureaucracy because there was a deadline of May 31st to get those funds under contract and start the distribution. So in the end, we came up with an alternative. We frankly dipped into our own operational funds in the Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs and got approval from the state board and the legislature to use $7 million out of our budgetary funds to fund that grant program. So within the past week, we've arranged through a partnership with Troy University to help us with the quick distribution of those funds. And the bottom line is those 33 nonprofits, veteran-related organizations, and institutions of higher education are going to get the $7 million as they were promised. So the end result was good, very painful, aggravating process getting there. And I'm not happy with some fellow Alabama departments who saw this as a territorial issue and didn't want that $7 million to go to Veterans Affairs. I'm just being completely candid. And I think Mr. Gavin was shaking his head over there in agreement with that. Next slide. All right, the next issue, at almost $300 million of opioid settlement funds, this is where you can help. I think a lot of politicians do not understand the special needs in the veteran population sometimes. So out of that $300 million, the State Board of Veterans Affairs, I think very rightly so, passed a unanimous resolution asking the Opioid Settlement Commission, which was appointed by the state legislature, to set aside a significant chunk of those funds to the veteran community to address the unique needs of veteran well-being, mental health, especially opioid addictions. We had great hope for that, and we were given initial indications that yes, there's going to be a significant set aside of those funds. Well, there have been 2 distributions of funds, almost $30 million so far. Anybody want to take a guess on how many of those dollars are slated for Veterans Affairs? Zero. That's exactly right, unfortunately. Next slide. So the second round of distributions, that's who got the money. The Department of Corrections, the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles, over $20 million to the Department of Mental Health. You don't see Veterans Affairs up there, which was frankly very disappointing. We have partnerships with a lot of organizations that are providing veterans well-being and mental health services to our veterans in Alabama, but they need assets. They are strapped. A lot of them are smaller nonprofits, and if they just got an infusion of cash, they could help a lot more veterans. Well, it's not going to happen now. Now, there's about $250 million left to be distributed over the next few years from those opioid settlement funds. So, yeah, this is a pitch. You can help by talking to your state legislators and saying, you got to help veterans. We serve all the liberties that you enjoy, and the fact that you can run for elective office has been born on the backs of those veterans. It's time for a little payback to help those who need a hand up in our community. Next slide. Last but not least, I salute these gentlemen. Senator Andrew Jones and Representative Chip Brown. Chip Brown's a retired Alabama National Guard colonel. They introduced a bill, House Bill 197 and Senate Bill 135, which purported to increase veterans' access to care, especially mental health care. Boy, another example of the aggravations of dealing with the government process sometimes. Great expansive bill. We had input. We told them, you need to tweak the bill just a little bit. They were fine with our recommended changes. And then once again, the lobbyists got involved, the special interests, other departments who saw this as an intrusion on their mission, and a bill that was very favorable and was going to funnel some of that money into our department to get in the hands of nonprofits to assist veterans through a grant program has been changed completely. Frankly, the lobbyists rewrote the bill 100%. So now, that bill, as it was passed, what it does, instead of initially funneling money, it creates a study commission to look at the issue of veterans' mental health for the next couple of years. Of course, my reaction was, how much longer do we need to study this? And my fear is, we're going to study this for 2 years and issue a famous government report that sits on a shelf and nothing happens with it. That's my fear. And I'm being incredibly candid with my comments. And you can probably detect how frustrating and aggravating this has been. and how special interests have put aside the interests of veterans in their own self-interest sometimes. Again, probably saying more than I should, and I might even get in trouble for that, but at some point, you have to say, I gotta advocate for veterans, and I don't care what feathers are ruffling, who I take off, to be honest with you, because this whole process was pretty heavy. So we'll see what that study commission comes up with in the next couple of years, and I'll be cautiously optimistic, but right now there's no money flowing from that, and those nonprofits that are begging for assets are not getting it. Thanks a lot, I guess I've said enough about that. Meanwhile, people ask me all the time, well, okay, so what are other states doing? Well, let me just give you one example, in our neighbor to the south. You look at those two bullets, and those are just minor examples. In just April, a couple of months ago, Governor DeSantis down in Florida signed into law a designation that each November is going to be the entire Veterans Appreciation Month, a month-long celebration. They also designated a Tuskegee Airmen Commemoration Day. Those are nice, good symbolic efforts. Governor DeSantis, a veteran himself, good on him. That's good recognition. But look at this. Last year, they passed a bill that created a comprehensive multi-million-dollar dental care program for veterans in that state. Oftentimes an issue with veterans, lack of dental care. That is a major program that Florida has started at the state level to help veterans. So when politicians ask me, so okay, what are other states doing? Okay, well there's an example. Why don't you look at something like that? Next slide. All right, I think I'm off my soapbox now. Here's a really good story. I think everyone knows that the feds are in charge largely of short-term medical care through hospitals and clinics. The states are in charge of long-term care. Next slide. We've long had, since the 1980s, a series of state veterans homes. Right now we have 4 located in Huntsville, Pell City, Alexander City, Bay Minette. These are world-class facilities, very cheap to stay there. The maximum charge for a private room, 3 meals a day, medical care activities is $24 a day. That's the maximum charge. And a lot of those veterans don't even pay that if they have a 70% disability or above rating. They're covered by the federal VA. So a great bargain. At least 1/10 of the cost for private long-term care. Beautiful facilities. But we had a nice problem. We've long had a waiting list to get into our homes. The demand has outpaced the supply. So a while back, next slide, we started the process to build a 5th state veterans home. Went through a long process. The State Board of Veterans Affairs did a very comprehensive job over 6 months picking a site and then a name. That new home will be called the Command Sergeant Major Benny G. Adkins State Veterans Home in Enterprise, Alabama. Alabama National Hero Medal of Honor recipient, passed away just a few years ago. Great gentleman, and we're proud of that. After 6 years of planning and building, we are looking to open that home on September 13th, 2024. So we are almost there. Here's the amazing thing, and I know this is hard to believe, it's a government project, but it is on time and on budget. Isn't that amazing? Next slide. So here's what it looks like. These pictures are just a few days old. That's the overall site. It's about 100 acres. Beautiful, beautiful area near Fort Novacell on the north side of Enterprise. We're well over 90% completion of the construction on this. Okay, well, I'm just going to flip through slides. So another view, that's from the back side. They just finished the asphalt paving. It's the employee parking lot. You can see it's kind of on the north side of Enterprise, in a semi-rural area. Beautiful facility. We picked kind of a farmhouse theme for the architecture since it's in a more rural area. A little closer in, they've actually started the landscaping and are well along with that. So we're almost done. We're ready to start putting furniture in there. Next slide. It will be arranged in different units or communities. We stress these are state veterans' homes. These are people's homes. And we want them to feel like it's their home. So they are distinct communities surrounding the central hub. Beautiful indoor courtyards. We're going to do some more external landscaping, including a path of honor along another railroad bed that's on the property with some monuments. The neighborhoods are going to be named after native Alabama trees, so we've kind of come up with that rural theme. So we'll have Poplar Place and the Camellia Cafe, all native Alabama trees and plants. Next slide. It's coming along. They're starting to lay the floors now. Mr. Gavin over there in the construction business can appreciate that. He knows that's probably the final phase when the carpet and tiling goes down. Just a beautiful, beautiful facility. This is one of the gathering areas at the entrance. Next slide. Individual rooms, they will be all private rooms for the residents there. Each room will have a shadow box outside so they can kind of say, this was my career, this is what I've done in life, to personalize their room. Next slide. Private bathroom, each one will have. Next slide. Of course, it is a semi-medical facility, so even though it's a private room, it will have the medical hookups for equipment. Next slide. Nurse call stations and dining areas in the communities. Those are communal gathering areas and dining halls that will be furnished out there. Next slide. A nurse call station, full nursing staff, over 200 full-time employees, so great economic benefit to that area. Next slide. Yes, there will be a sports bar, recreational activities. No kidding. I'm already picking out my room. I walk through there and I'm amazed. It looks like a resort. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful facility. Next slide. One of the central gathering areas, look at that. It looks more like a ski resort than a long-term care facility. They just put the fireplace in just about 2 weeks ago, so really beautiful. Next slide. All right, last but certainly not least, and I know y'all got the agenda, you gotta move on. State Veteran Cemetery. This is a pure partnership. There's an increasing push for states to establish veteran cemeteries, and I think I've mentioned this before. We are still in the preliminary stages of exploring another veteran cemetery in Alabama. We need one up in North Alabama. There is no veteran cemetery, believe it or not, in the Huntsville area with all the growth going on there. So we'll seriously look at that. That's probably our next big project. But we're not waiting on that. We share this responsibility with the feds. The federal VA owns 2 active cemeteries in Alabama, in Montevallo and Fort Mitchell over in the eastern part of the state. The largest one by acreage is actually the state cemetery down in Spanish Fort that we control. It's a pure partnership. You really can't tell the difference when you go to those cemeteries. They operate under the same rules, same landscaping standards and all of that. Another demand that we had was demand for burials, and we were running out of space in our state cemetery. Next slide. And we've had some growth in the demand lately. For instance, we were the 3rd state in the country to start allowing burials of traditional guardsmen and reservists. Believe it or not, there was a quirk in the law that said if you were in the Guard or Reserve and you hadn't served in a Title 10 deployment or retired from the Guard or Reserve, you weren't eligible for burial in a veterans cemetery, which we thought was crazy. You had people who served for sometimes decades in uniform for the Guard and deployed for hurricane relief and things like that, and couldn't be buried with their comrades in a veterans cemetery. So we kind of pushed for a change in the federal law. That was successful a couple of years ago, and then it was up to the individual states to approve that and to fund those burials. We started, we were the 3rd state. We were the only state that doesn't charge for that. We say, why would we treat those veterans any differently? So this year we started burying Guard and Reserve traditional members in our state veteran cemetery. That's increased demand a little bit. And along with the growing demand in general for veteran cemeteries. Next slide. We get a lot of support despite the increasing demand. We have Boy Scout troops that come in, Girl Scout troops, and other civic groups, church groups that come help decorate grave sites. So we're really heartened by that. Next slide. But we realized we got to find more room. We're literally running out of burial plots. And a veteran cemetery, you have to plan several years in advance. It's not a matter of, when someone dies, you open up a burial spot and bury them. You have to build out concrete burial vault fields in the thousands well ahead of time in advance of burials. And you got to do a lot of strategic planning and kind of forecast your demand. So we knew we were going to run out of space in the next few years. So we started a process a couple of years ago. We got a large federal grant to expand our state veterans cemetery. We got the grant money, did everything you're supposed to do, hired an architect, general contractor, and in February 2024, we finished that project. I'm gonna show you how complex it is building or expanding a veteran cemetery. Next slide. The first thing you do, you gotta dig out about 10 feet of dirt. And then you gotta put in drainage systems, and then you place thousands of concrete burial vaults that can hold two grave sites, because spouses are eligible for burial in the cemetery as well. So that's kind of in the middle after the dirt has been dug out, drainage systems, and then they're starting to put concrete burial vaults. Next slide. And of course, these have to be placed with millimeter precision. Next slide. And then the next, once that's done, oh, and also we build columbarium space. There's an increasing demand for cremated remains. That's kind of surprised us how that demand is going up. So we had to build additional columbarium space for burial urns. And once that's all done, you have to put the dirt back in place. Next slide. And that's the end result. You put topsoil and sod down, and believe it or not, under that field alone there are 2,700 burial vaults awaiting future burial now. So we are ready for about the next 10 years of burials in our state veteran cemetery, which is a very good thing. Next slide. And just a beautiful area. You know, I see people encounter them all the time. They just are wandering around the veteran cemeteries looking at grave sites, and that's really nice. And sometimes they have no connection with that cemetery. They just want to pay their respects and look at the headstones and read about the great veterans that are buried there. And that's it. All right, sorry I went a little long, but I wanted to give you a complete update and let you know, and I mean this may sound a little corny, I take it very seriously, stewardship of the taxpayer dollars, and I want you to know we're doing a lot with every single penny that we get from the state of Alabama and the federal government to support veterans, including you. I'm a proud member of VFW. The veteran service organizations are our great partners, but just know we're working every single day with every penny that we get, and we only have one motive, and that's to support the 400,000 veterans in the state of Alabama. So thank you so much. I'll be glad to answer any questions if you want. Anything at all? Yes, sir.
What was the total cost of the new home being built in the enterprise?
Great question. When you throw in everything, it ain't cheap. The good news is it's a shared responsibility between the federal government and the state. It's about a 50-50 proposition on this one. So total cost, you add up, you know, all of the studies and architectural design, general contractor, furnishing with kitchen equipment and beds and all that, it's over $100 million, just over $100 million. So, but you think about that, that facility will probably last. Our oldest home is now 40 years old. And it addresses a serious demand. Speaking of money, the good news is the future operations in the home cost the state very little money, because we get a stipend or per diem from the federal government for every day, for every resident that we can prove we have a resident there that qualifies. So we get operational funds through the federal VA. So it really doesn't cost. Once we build a facility and the 50% allocation from the state, the operations are largely funded by the federal VA going forward. So it's a real bargain, I think, for the veterans of Alabama and citizens in general. But the whole construction project and furnishing, a little over $100 million. Now, put that in perspective. All right, I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this. The new state house for the state legislature is gonna cost $400 million. And the new prison that we're building is over $1 billion. And I say, for any politician who wants to challenge the cost of a $100 million state veterans home, what would you rather spend money on? Prisoners, politicians, or veterans? Elderly and disabled veterans. Let's compare. Let's do a little comparison. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Scott Admiral, Post 3128.
Yes, sir.
How does it affect our waiting list? Is it really gonna?
Another great question. We're hoping it'll almost eliminate our current waiting list. And I'm going to be honest, and this gets a little complicated. One of the reasons we pursued this home, we're pretty certain we had the longest waiting list in the country. There's two reasons for that. One is we didn't have enough homes. Second is, no kidding, our homes probably have a reputation as among the best, if not the best in the country. We know that because we get awards, federal VA surveys, we get inspected by the Alabama Department of Public Health, and they walk away saying, wow, these are magnificent facilities. They really are. They're beautiful. I know I'm biased, but every time I go in, I'm amazed how beautiful the facilities are. Right now, every quarter I do a count. I go through the residential statistics. You apply to the individual home. So if you look at all of the homes, and I have to be careful with this number because people will apply to 2 or even 3 or sometimes all 4 homes. Right now there's about 400 people, believe it or not, on our waiting list. We know there's a lot of duplication, so realistically there's probably about 150 to 200 people waiting to get into the homes. Well, the new home's going to have 174 beds, so it should knock out the majority of that waiting list, is our hope. Do we need a 6th home? Yeah, we could probably make an argument we need a 6th home. We've even kind of tentatively looked at that and thought probably West Alabama over near Tuscaloosa, Demopolis area would be an ideal location, but that's a next project after we pursue another state veterans home. So about 400 total on all 4 home waiting lists, realistically 150 to 200 people, and this should knock out a lot of that waiting list. That's our hope. Yes, sir.
Admiral, District 5 Commander and 4544 alternate. Thank you for coming to our post here.
Oh, that's great. Great post. I enjoyed spending time with them recently.
Back on the legislatures and their let's study this thing, please remind those folks of what happened at Camp Lejeune and the toxic water. All they did was study it, study it, study it, study it, and people were dying.
Yeah, listen, I'm a government bureaucrat, but the government bureaucratic answer is too often, oh, let's study the issue. Okay, you know, I keep saying ad nauseum, veterans, suicides, mental health has been studied and studied and studied. I've got reams of studies that have been done on this. At some point, you gotta say, stop studying it, do something. And there are already successful pilot programs. We know what works. We know that peer-based counseling works. We know that some of the innovative things like, as wild as it may seem, equine therapy, and things like that, service dogs and things like that, but we just need money to support those programs that are already out there. You mentioned Camp Lejeune, another issue that I hear all the time, and there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't hear something about Fort McClellan. And especially with the PACT Act passage a couple of years ago, a lot of veterans, I think rightly so, say, why didn't you take care of Fort McClellan veterans in that? You took care of Camp Lejeune, which had 1 toxic exposure. Well, arguably at Fort McClellan, there were multiple exposures over many decades going all the way back to World War I. In this case, again, kind of like Agent Orange, we didn't know scientifically the long-term effects of a lot of those exposures, but at McClellan, there was exposure to VX and GP nerve agent, mustard agent, radiological materials, herbicides, you name it, dozens of exposures. And I hear from the sad stories from veterans, from other state directors, even from the federal VA, about the problems that veterans at Fort McClellan face, and they feel abandoned sometimes. And we push that issue a lot. VFW National has passed a resolution in support of those veterans, and it's long past time we took care of those veterans as well.
Thank you, sir.
What else? Anything at all? Yes, sir. Way in the back. Yes, sir.
Appreciate you speaking today. I'm Bert Brown from 06652 Raglan, Alabama. I've got with me a friend who are in the veterans home, Robert L. Howard.
Yeah.
And spent a lot of time in and out of there. Those guys, you know, they're just like everybody else in here. They spent a long time living out, you know, here for the country. And those guys, if they go past 4 days being gone from the veterans home, there's a fee that they have to pay on top of, you know, being gone. Is there anything being done about that?
Yeah, great question. That's a federal law. The per diem that we get from the federal government is stuck by those rules. We have pushed, and the executive director of our state veterans home, Ms. Kim Justice, if you never met her, great lady, nationally recognized. She belongs to something called the National Association of State Veterans Homes. They are pushing for a change in that law. It's one of those we're beholden to the federal rules, and if we don't abide by them, we'll lose our federal funding and we couldn't operate those homes. It's a significant issue, and we hear that all the time. But yeah, when veterans move out, even if it's, you know, to go to rehab or something. We lose money, they lose money, it's a mess. It's one of those legislative changes that needs to take place, frankly. All right, I've been told I gotta cut off the questions, because I'm putting you behind on time. I mean this sincerely. We're a friendly bunch in ADVA. Jeff's gonna be here with you. Look, you reach out to us, we are down to earth, we have no ulterior motives, we are not political, I promise. We got no ulterior motives, we're with you, just taking care of veterans. You reach out anytime, we can help you. Be glad to answer any other questions, and I'll stick around for a while. Thanks so much.